Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. So we are continuing our discussion from the 27th chapter of the third canto, which is entitled 27th chapter is entitled as the understanding material nature. So in the previous chapter, which is entitled Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, Kapila Dev described the uh, characteristics of the various elements of the material nature. And before that, in the beginning, he described the interactions between the Jiva, Prakriti, and the Supreme Lord. Then he described the characteristics of various elements starting from Pradhan. All the elements, all the 26 elements of material nature are described, 24 elements. All the characteristics are described, starting from Pradhan, then Mahatattva, then the Kala, and then Ahankar, and then Ahankar in the three modes, and then all the material elements which are formed, which are the elements that are formed by Satvik Ahankar, Rajasik Ahankar, Tamsik Ahankar, and the Tamsik Ahankar produces the 5 elements and the 5 Tanmatras. The Rajasik Ahankar produces prana and intelligence, and then the Satvik Ahankar produces the mind and the 10 sense devtas. So the Rajasik Ahankar also produces the 10 senses, 5 karmendriyas and 5 jnanendriyas. So all those characteristics were described in the previous chapter. And then after describing the characteristics of all these, Kapila describes the Karya Srishti, the creation, Karya Srishti and Karan Srishti, the primary creation by Supreme Lord. And then he described how the various limbs were created by limbs of Virat Rup were created. And then in the end of the previous chapter, we heard all the devtas, they were trying to wake up this Virat Rupa. All the 10 sense devtas, they were trying to wake up this Virat Purusha. But the Virat Purusha was not able to get up. That means the Virat Rupa was not getting functional. The universe didn't get functional unless Lord himself appeared as Vasudev in this Virat Purusha, Virat Rupa. So that was the end of this chapter. And the last verse of this previous chapter described what is the need of describing all these things in so detail. So the last verse says, Tamasven pratyagatmanam dhiya yoga pravrittaya bhaktya viraktya jnanena vivichya atmani chintayet. So the goal of what is the goal of explaining the analysis of all these elements? The goal is to contemplate on the Lord with ahetuki bhakti. That is the goal. Bhaktya viraktya jnanena, through devotion, detachment, and spiritual knowledge, vivichya atmani, acquired through concentrated devotional service, one should chintayet, one should contemplate. So that's the ultimate goal of all this Sankhya. So that's what we discussed in the previous chapter. Now in this 27th chapter, Understanding Material Nature, Kapila Dev continues to describe the Sankhya in more detail. And the first chapter, first verse we heard last time, we discussed last time. So in the first 5 verses, Kapila Dev first describes what is the need of liberation first of all. Then he will describe what happens after liberation. So in this first 5 verses, he is describing what is the use, why one thinks, why should think of getting liberated. So Prakriti Sthopi Purusho, all the Jiva is situated in this material world. Nachyate, the living entities never get affected by the material modes. And we heard the verse from Bhagavad Gita, the example of the sky yatha prakashyateka kritsnam lokam imam ravi, and the akasham nopalipyate, that verse we discussed. Yatha prakashyateka akasham nopalipyate sarvatra avasthito dehe tathatma nopalipyate. It's like the sky never gets contaminated by whatever is happening inside it. Similarly, the soul never gets affected, although the soul is in the modes, in this material world, which is full of modes. So this verse says, Najyate, the spirit soul never gets affected, and the example was given, just like the sun remains aloof from its reflection on the water. Jal arkavat. So the sun is the soul, and the water is the three modes. So the water may go through various changes, but the sun, which is getting reflected in the water, never gets affected. Similarly, the soul is reflecting through this material modes. So it appears that the soul is moving, soul is getting affected. Ichha, dvesh, sukham, dukham, sanghatas, chetana, dhriti, etat kshetra samasena. Krishna says these are the kshetra vikar. Why it is kshetra vikar? The soul experiences all these emotions. So then why it is said that ichha, dvesh, sukha, dukha, these are the transformations of the body? Because actually all the transformations are happening in the body. But the soul is identifying with the body. That's why the soul also appears to go through various transformations. So that is what is described. So we discussed the first verse. We will continue with the second verse. We'll recite this. Sa eshayarhi prakriter
Aeshayarihi prakrite
Eshwabhivisajjate
Neshvabhivisajjate
Aham kriya vimudhatma
Aham kriya vimudhatma
Kritasmiti abhimanyate.
Anyamsmiti abhimanyate. When the soul is under the spell of material nature and false ego, identifying his body as a self, he becomes absorbed in material activities. And by the influence of false ego, he thinks that he is the proprietor of everything.
So anyone remembers any similar verse in Bhagavad Gita? Very famous verse, which has similar words almost. Ahankar vimudhatma.
Ahankar vimudhatma.
So prakrite kriya, that is 3.27. Krishna Srila Prabhupada also quotes that in the purport. Prakrite kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudha atma karta aham iti manyate. So the same words are used here. Ahankriya vimudha atma karta asmi iti. Same, exact same. Karta aham, karta asmi, karta aham iti manyate. यहाँ पे अभिमन्यते. So these are the similar verses. So Srila Prabhupada describes how the soul is forced to act under the pressure of the modes of nature. Pressure of the modes of nature are making the soul work, but the soul is independent. But because he is forced by the modes, he is not independent. He works under the influence of the modes. But when he gets free, then but he's under the Supreme Lord when he is free. When he is not affected by the modes, he gets free. But when he's trying to enjoy, he gets under the modes of nature. And he thinks, I am the doer, I am the proprietor, I am the controller. Ishvaro ham ham bhogi, siddho ham balavan sukhi. That is the mentality of a peak person who is trying to enjoy this world. I am the controller, I am powerful, I have controlled all these things, all these people. Guna refers to the qualities of nature and he is under the qualities of nature. But he falsely thinks that he is a proprietor. This false proprietorship can be avoided simply by engaging in devotional service. Otherwise, it is not possible. No one can come out of the modes of nature on their own. Which verse in Bhagavad Gita says this? Only by practice of devotional service one can transcend the modes of nature. The last verse of the 14th chapter, second last verse, 14th chapter, Krishna says this. I'm also forgetting that verse. In that, Krishna says, a person.
Is it that?
14.26. Yeah, 14.26 says this very famous verse. A person who is practicing devotional service, he is beyond the modes of nature. Mam chayo avyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatityaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. That is that verse. So avyabhicharani bhakti, anyone who performs avyabhicharini bhakti, unalloyed devotion, sagunan samatityaitan, he transcends the modes and he enters into the platform of Brahma Bhuyaya Kalpate. So only by practice of devotional service one can transcend the modes of nature. Otherwise, it is very difficult. So Srila Prabhupada writes, Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita was trying to accept for himself the responsibility for killing his grandfathers and teachers. He was thinking, I'll be responsible. I'll kill all of them. I'll become sinful. Krishna says, no, you work for a higher purpose. You will not be affected. Only a foolish person thinks that he is a doer. And that's why he suffers. When one works for higher purpose, he never gets affected. Prabhupada writes, that is the difference between the liberation and conditioning. A liberated soul always understands that all his activities, they are governed by the modes of nature. He never ever takes them seriously. In the 5th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says actually everything in this body is also governed by the nature. Pashyan, Shrinvan, Sprishan, Jigran, Ashnan, Gachan, Sopan, Swashan, Pralapan, Visrajan, Grihanan, Unmishan, Nimishan, Napi. So he says all the activities which are happening in the body. Activity of seeing, Pashyan, Shrinvan, Sprishan, touching, Jigran, smelling, Ashnan, eating, Gachan, even walking, Swapan, Swashan, sleeping, breathing, Unmishan, Nimishan, Napi, even closing of the eyes, opening of the eyes. Everything is happening automatically, basically. Everything in our body is controlled. Everything is acting under the will of the Lord. So a devotee understands this. He never thinks that he is a proprietor, he is a controller. He knows. And therefore he acts under the direction of the Supreme Lord. Thus, his actions may not appear to be of a very high quality to the common man, but the devotee has no responsibility. So outside everything, well, what is this? He is not taking any proprietorship. He is thinking that, oh, everything is done by the Lord. Oh, he's not a very self-accomplished person. He's not a, go-getter. No problem. A devotee humbly accepts what he is. He never has false understanding about this world. He never thinks karta aham iti manyate. Because ultimately everything is happening by the will of the Lord, and thus this world is working for the enjoyment of the Lord, and the Lord enjoys when we become closer to Him. He continues in the next verse. Tena sansara padavim
Tena samsara padavim
avashvapyetya nirvritaha
aveshopyeta anivrittaha
prastikai karma doshai
प्रासंगिकै कर्मदोषे
asad asanmishrayonishu.
सत् असत्मिश्रयोनिषु.
The conditioned soul therefore transmigrates into different species of life, higher and lower, because of his association with the modes of material nature. Unless he is relieved of material activities, he has to accept this position because of his faulty work.
So now, Kapila describes, because the living entity thinks that he is a doer, he is a proprietor, he is a controller, that's why he goes through transmigration. Samsara padavi. Samsar mein padvi milti hai usko. He has to accept the positions in this world. Avasho abhyeti anirvritai. Avasho. He cannot direct. I want to become Devta. Okay? No, you are forced by the material nature. Avasha, you are not under control. Helplessly abhyeti, he undergoes. Anirvrita, and he is discontented. Wherever he goes, living entity is not satisfied. Our living entity never gets satisfied in any species of life. Prasangikai karma doshai. Because any position he takes, it has some fault. Karma dosh. Prasangikai karma dosha. Any species. And because of that fault, sad asad mishra yonishu. Sometimes he goes to the higher species, sometimes to lower species, sometimes mishra, middle species. Keeps transmigrating unwillingly, avashaha. This anirvrita, this very sad living entity, vichara, dukhi jiva, anirvrita. He treads through the path of samsara padavi. Samsara mein ghumta rehta hai, prasangika, because of the association with prakriti. The same verse comes in Bhagavad Gita also. Exact same. In 13th chapter, 21st verse. Purusha prakriti sthohi bhungte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangasya sad asad yoni janmashu. Exact same. Purushaha prakriti astho. Because the living entity is situated in this material world. Purusha prakriti stopi bhungte. Desire is to enjoy. Bhungte prakriti jan gunan. He tries to enjoy this material nature which is working under the three modes. And because of this, because of association with the modes, what happens? Sad asad yoni janmashu, kabhi upar, kabhi niche. Bhagavatam also describes the condition of a living entity who is bound. Very graphic example. Bhagavatam gives the example of a street dog, not a pet dog. Pet dog के बहुत मजे हैं आजकल. Pet dog के लिए बहुत सारे आजकल spa है, clinics है. Just outside our temple, our Grand Road, is Chowpatty Temple. Just next road, we have two pet spa. Pet spa means dogs ke liye, only dogs and cats. So how to take care of the dogs, skin spa. So street dog ki baat ki ja rahi hai, not pet dog of Kaliyuga. Shutparito yatha deenam sarameyam griham griham charanavindanti yaddeenam dandam modanameva. Shutparito, a dog who is afflicted with hunger and thirst. Shutparita yatha deenam bichara. Sarmeya means dog. Ghar ghar jata hai, griham griham. Somewhere he gets a nice food to eat, somewhere he gets a stick and beaten. Similarly, yatha kamashayo jiva bhute shuchavacheshvanu uparyadhova madhyeva yati parya yati dishtam priya priyam. Similarly, yatha kama ashaya jiva, a living entity who is under the influence of desires. Bhuteshu uchavacheshvanu, sometimes goes to the higher planets, sometimes to the lower planets, lower species. कभी ऊपर, कभी बीच में, कभी नीचे, ऊपरी, अधा, मध्य, ऊपरी, अधा, मध्य. कभी ऊपर जाएगा, कभी नीचे जाएगा, कभी बीच में रहेगा. याति दिष्टम प्रिया प्रियम, कभी उसको अच्छा मिलता है, कभी बुरा मिलता है. That's how it is. So living entity is always running after sense gratification, but he never gets the way he wants. And the desire just drives the living entity in all the species of life. Bhagavad Gita also says the same thing. Urdhvam gachanti sattvastha, madhye tishtanti rajasa, jaganaguna vrittistha, adho gachanti tamasa. Urdhvam gachanti, ऊपर कौन जाता है? सत्वगुण वाले. रजोगुण में they stay in the earthly planet. Tamogun, they go to lower species of life. So because the soul identifies with the matter, the soul suffers. Prabhupada focuses on this word, karma doshai, prasangikai karma doshai. So what is karma dosha? The faulty actions. This refers to any activity, good or bad, performed in this material world. They are all contaminated. It is not that, okay, the activities in the mode of goodness are not contaminated. They are also contaminated. Whether one is acting in the goodness, passion, or ignorance, they are all contaminated actions. Because any action in this world will lead to rebirth if it is not done for Krishna. So foolish soul thinks that he is offering charity by opening hospitals or by opening education institutions. He does not know all such work is also faulty. Sad asad mishra yonishu. One may go to heavenly situations, one may go to lower species of life. Prabhupada writes, to take birth in a nice place or a nice family does not mean that one avoids birth, old age, disease, and death. Anywhere you go in this world, these things will be there for sure. संसार पदवी मिलती है, संसार में जहां कहीं भी पदवी मिले, the problems will be there. कितना भी अच्छा पदवी मिले, कितने भी बड़े पदवी पे रहे, birth, old age, disease, and death will be there. That's why the word used is संसार पदवी. संसार पदवी में 4 चीजें फ्री आती हैं, birth, old age, disease, and death. Okay, he continues. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, he undergoes samsara by faulty action arising from association with Prakriti. Arthe hi avidyamane bhi samsritirna nivartate
संस्कृतिर्नानि वर्तते
ayato vishayanasya
ध्यातो विषयानस्य
anarthagamo yatha.
स्वप्ने अर्थागमो यथा.
Actually, a living entity is transcendental to material existence. But because of his mentality of lording it over material nature, his material existential condition does not cease. And just as in a dream, he is affected by all sorts of disadvantages.
Yes. So because of this doership mentality, the living entity suffers. Arthehi avidyaman. Although there is no existence of actions, material actions for Jiva. Jiva is spiritual. The Jiva doesn't have to undergo material actions. But because he is identifying, because he is dhyato vishayan kumsa sangasteshu pajayate, because he is meditating on the sense objects, because he is thinking himself to be the doer, the result is samsritirna nivartate. Samsriti means this material existence. Samsriti is a very common word, comes many times. Anyone remembers anywhere else this word samsriti comes in any bhajan or in any verse? Samsriti. Samsriti. When one bhajan says Samsriti Ghore, Gopinath bhajan mein aata hai. Samsriti, this entire universe is a terrible material existence. Samsriti. Samsriti Manivartate. So, because of lording over mentality and because of meditating on the sense objects, dhyato vishayanasya, he does not stop this material existence. But the interesting thing is, all the happiness of this world, all the sense gratification of this world, it is like experience of the unreal actions and dream. All these dreaming situations, they don't satisfy the soul. So Srila Prabhupada writes, the example of a dream is very appropriate. Due to different mental conditions, that in the dreams, we put our into advantageous and disadvantageous positions. Similarly, the soul has nothing to do with material nature. But because of its lording over mentality, he is put into the position of conditional existence. Prabhupada tells a funny story of a person who was very poor. One day, he gets a pot of milk. He is very happy. Matka milaya, matka doodh bhar ke. He takes the pot to his home and thinking about what he will do with the pot, he goes to sleep. In the dream, he starts a business. He sells 1 liter of milk, gets 2 liters, then 4 liters, then उसका और business अब मतलब सपने में ही चल रहा है. उसका business बढ़ रहा है, and then he buys a cow, and then गाय और बढ़ गई तो गौशाला ले लिया, गौशाला को देखने के लिए he keeps a servant, servant को देखने के लिए he gets married, and then in the dream he sings, and I will tell my wife to take care of all the things, and if she will not listen, I'll kick her. And in the dream he kicks the pot and the pot breaks. So that's how the business ends. Begins in the dream and ends in the dream. So all the happiness of this world, it is like a daydream. Prabhupada would tell many times, Bhagavatam tells many times, Anywhere, anyone remembers anywhere else this example is given of the dream? One very, very classic example, classic question Parikshit Maharaj asked in the 8th chapter, 2nd canto. What is the relation between the matter and the spirit? How can there be a relation between matter and spirit? Spirit, Atma, is spiritual. How can the spiritual develop relation with material? तो शुद्धदेव गोस्वामी क्या बोलते हैं? बोलते हैं क्वेश्चन itself is wrong. No relationship. स्वप्न द्रष्टुर न घटेतार्थ संबंध स्वप्न द्रष्टुर इवांजसा. सपने में बस ख्याली पुलाव पका रहे हैं, सपने में बिल्डिंग बांध रहे हैं, बिजनेस बना रहे हैं. That is how the world is. No relationship. It's like a person who is suffering in a dream because he is being chased by a tiger. भाग रहा है बेचारा, भाग रहा है because उसके पीछे शेर पड़ा है. And he is really sweating also. And if you have cried in dream anytime, सपना देख के रो रहे बगल में, और बगल वाले बोल रहे हैं क्यों रो रहा है भाई? What is the only thing which a person can do to help that person? अरे मैं भी सोता हूँ उसके बगल में. I'll enter his dream and I'll chase away the tiger. ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता. What we have to do is just wake up that person. But Maya Devi creates such a powerful dream, doesn't allow us to get up. The dream of illusory enjoyment is so strong. उठना ही नहीं देती है माया देवी. जीव जागो गौरचंद्र बोले कतो निद्रा जाओ माया पिशाची रखोले. बोल रहे हैं उठो उठो उठो, why you are sleeping on the lap of Maya? बहुत खतरनाक ड्रीम है. So that's why this dream example is very, very, very important. And then Prabhupada describes Dhyayato Vishayanasya. Prabhupada quotes, unless we serve the Supreme Lord, unless one develops this knowledge that I am not enjoyer, Supreme Lord is enjoyer, he will keep on suffering. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram is only one, that is Krishna. And we have to learn to develop this understanding that he is the Supreme Lord and I am not. So that is understanding. And then Prabhupada writes, someone may claim himself to be a very good national worker, the best friend of people, country, but actually he cannot be the greatest friend of everyone. Only friend is Krishna. He is a Suridam Sarva Bhutana. So that is what Krishna consciousness teaches. The best service is to awaken Krishna consciousness. Many times when these things are spoken, they look really radical and really extreme. The problem क्या है और आप क्या solution दे रहे हो? The world is in hunger, starving. Chant Hare Krishna. अरे chant Hare Krishna से क्या होगा? People, they can't understand when somebody is preaching this message of Bhagavad Gita, how it will practically transform the world, how it will practically help the world. Because for a common eye, there is no relation between the problems and chanting Hare Krishna. But the great sages from the millennia, they are describing, they have shown how being Krishna conscious helps the entire world. That's why Krishna wanted only the devotees to be the kings. Yudhishthir Maharaj, Parikshit Maharaj. Why he wanted only devotee to be kings? Because a devotee, he works for the welfare of everyone, and at the same time, he brings the citizens to his level of consciousness. Abhippalat dharmaraja pitrivat ranjayan praja nispriya sarvakamebhyo Krishnapadanu sevaya. Yudhishthir Maharaj was taking care of the citizens like children. Pitrivat, pita ke jaise. Personally, he had no desire for sense gratification. Nispriha. Spriha means desire. Nispriha. Sarvakamebhyo, no material desire at all. Because he was engaged in service of the Lord. So when people, they engage in service of the Lord, they purify their heart by hearing and chanting, the natural outcome of a heart which is full of devotion is they like to help others. They'll not be greedy. So there is no lack, as you know, there's a wonderful saying, there is sufficient for everyone's need in this world, but not for one person's greed. So material nature provides for everyone. But because of the greed, people suffer. So that's why Srila Prabhupada was very, very emphatic in this understanding. There is only one thing which is needed in this world, that is Krishna consciousness. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes, how does the jiva end up bound by karma created by his bodies, even though he actually performs no action? Since the jiva is not the doer, nor has means of doing anything. So the answer is, even though the actions does not really exist, the jiva meditates on sense objects and thinks that he is the doer. And this mentality of identifying with the objects of the world makes the living entity suffer. Just like in the dream, a person suffers although nothing is happening to him. Therefore, what one should do then? So then he describes the solution. What is the solution? Now, in fourth canto, there's a very wonderful example given how the mind and senses, they attract a person's attention. The example is given of the big grasses which grow on the side of a small lake. The verse is from 4th canto, 22nd chapter, 30th verse, 4:22-30. Indriya Vishaya Krishtir Akshiptam Dhyayatam Manaha. In Chetana Harate Buddhe Stambastoyam Yathar Ivaradat. So this verse is, just like the grasses which are on the sides of a lake, they absorb all the water. Similarly, Chetana Harate Buddhe. So what happens? The senses are attracted by sense objects, and the senses attracts the mind attracts the intelligence. इंद्रिया किससे आकर्षित होती हैं? विषय. And then ध्यायतो विषयान पुंसा starts. And then chetana, mind gets attracted where the senses go. And the intelligence also gets attracted where the mind goes. So the real consciousness is lost. And one completely follows the dictations of the senses. So that's how the entire human society suffers. So therefore, what's the solution to it? Then after establishing the need for liberation, bataya zarurat hai bhai, otherwise the cycle of birth and death will go on, because people start identifying with being a doer. They take birth again and again, and they suffer like a person suffering in a dream. So therefore, we need to get liberated of this condition. Now, in the 5th verse, he gives a solution. How to get liberation? Ataeva shanaischittam
Atayeva
क्षणेक्षिप्तम्
prasaktam asatam pathi
प्रसक्तम् असतां पथि
yogena tivrena
भक्तियोगेन तीव्रेण
tyacha nayed vasham viraktya.
विरक्तात् च नैवेद्वशम्. It's the duty of every conditioned soul to to engage his polluted consciousness, which is now attached to material enjoyment, in very serious devotional service with detachment. Thus, his mind and consciousness will be under full control. Hare Krishna.
Therefore, ataha shanai, gradually. What you should do gradually, everything happens gradually in spiritual life. Nothing happens immediately. Emergency में कुछ नहीं होता है. Everything happens gradually in process of Krishna consciousness. Shanai, Shanai, Uparame, Buddhya, Dhriti, Grihitaya. This word comes many times. Shanai, Shanai. सब धीरे धीरे होता है. वो जल्दीबाजी में नहीं होता है भक्ति में. Shanai. Ataev, gradually, what he should do? Chittam cha naid vasham. One should get the mind under the control. Because the chitta, it is prasaktam asatam pathi. Chitta, mind is attracted to sense objects, material objects. How to control the mind? How to bring the mind under control? Bhakti yogena. By the process of bhakti and yoga or yoga. But which type of bhakti yoga? Tivra bhakti yoga. Not ordinary, strong bhakti yoga. Tivrena bhakti yogena. And then viraktya. One should be detached. One should not try to enjoy this world, at the same time try to practice devotional service. No, it will not work. One has to develop, one has to practice serious devotional service with the detachment. Prabhupada writes, the process of liberation is very nicely explained in this verse. The cause of one's condition, becoming conditioned by material nature, is his thinking himself the enjoyer. Purusha prakriti stoi bhungte prakriti jan gunan karanam guna sangasya sadasat yoni janmasu. 15th chapter, 13th chapter, 21st verse. Because of the tendency of enjoyment, people suffer. And people, they think how they will enjoy different ways. Personal sense gratification or extended sense gratification. Nationalistic, philanthropic, altruistic, national leader or humanist. The so-called, Prabhupada writes, they don't serve anyone. They're serving their senses only. It is just an extended way of sense gratification only. Of course, we should be careful when we speak these things in public forums. We should not, present the facts of scriptures in a way that backfires. Because immaturely, devotees have done this in the past. They have royally destroyed our name. In Quora, if any of you go on Quora, Quora is one of the sites where most of the philosophical questions are put. It is a very, one of all the social media things, this Quora is the little philosophical side. So one devotee was telling me, I think Shaman was telling us, yes. So he was telling that in Quora, somehow ISKCON has got a very bad name. Because the devotees from ISKCON, they give all sorts of extreme answers. Oh, there is a flood and, thousands of people are killed and why this is happening? This is all the law of karma. They are suffering the results of their karma. Hello, where? It may be right. It may be right explanation, but it is not the right forum to say this. Chaitanya Charan was giving a class to all of us a few days back in the temple here. And he was telling how we should be very, very sensitive when we speak the principles to the outsiders. Because the principles may be right, but if we are not mature enough to present the principles in right way, we will spoil the name of Prabhupada. Then will be seen as insensitive and cruel people, hard-hearted people, stone-hearted people. So of course, Bhagavatam condemns Dehatma Buddhi Kunabas, Yasyatma Buddhi Kunapetri Dhatuke, those who are thinking the birthplace as their worshipable land. Unka intelligence kaisa hai? What example is given? Anyone knows? They are compared to what? They are compared to cows and asses. Gokhara. So all these things are perfect. But how to present this to the public, that we should be very careful of. क्या बोलना है क्या नहीं बोलना है? What should be spoken? Anudvega karam vakyam. This principle should be always followed. Speech should not be disturbing. We should speak the truth, but we should not disturb the faith of people. So when we have heard Prabhupada, he was very strong against all these things. Prabhupada was calling, oh, all these are rascals, and so one disciple, he also started imitating the same language. Prabhupada called him and said, I can speak all that. You can't. Because an old man can speak anything and get away with that. You can't do the same. So Srila Prabhupada, he many times spoke very strongly, but we should be careful. We should know how to present in right way so that people can appreciate the same principles. So Prabhupada writes, it is therefore recommended in this verse that one very seriously engage in devotional service. One should not think that he is a proprietor, benefactor, friend, or enjoyer. The only enjoyer is Krishna. And then says, yes, that is the basic principle of Bhakti Yoga. Then he says, one must be firmly convinced of these three principles. What are these three principles? Krishna is a proprietor, Krishna is an enjoyer, and Krishna is a friend. So these are three important principles. Krishna is a proprietor. He owns everything. And because he owns everything, he enjoys everything. And not that because he is an enjoyer, how will I enjoy? No, he is a friend of everyone. He is not a sadist. He is never an insecure God. He wants to share all his properties with his devotees. There's a beautiful story when Rukmini Devi, she writes a letter and Krishna comes and kidnaps her. And all the soldiers of Rukmini and Shishupal, they are attacking Rukmini. She becomes really scared, afraid of seeing all the armies. Lord Krishna speaks a beautiful verse there. He says, Ma bhai vamalochane, says, oh lotus-eyed one, please don't fear. He says, in a very short time, Tavakai Kshatravam Balam, your army will destroy these armies. He's not yet married to Rukmini. But he says, your army, Kshatravam Tavakai Kshatravam Balam. So Krishna, he is ready to share all his property with his devotees. He is not thinking, "Arey inko de denge to sab mera hadat to nahi lenge." No, he is a very secure God. Nobody can take away the property of Krishna. He is all powerful. So when we have this faith in God, then our devotee becomes peaceful. So Prabhupada writes, not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. And then Prabhupada writes, as soon as one starts thinking that I am the proprietor and I am renouncing, Prabhupada says, what is there what is yours to renounce, first of all? To renounce, first of all, you should have something, right? If a beggar says, I renounce this bank, this bank was not yours at all. How can you say, I renounce this bank? So, aham sarvasya prabho matta sarvam pravartate. Everything belongs to Krishna. So, what is there? What is yours for you to renounce? So, what we have to renounce? We have to renounce this possessive mentality. We think that we are enjoyer. We think that we are proprietor. Prabhupada writes, as soon as one engages in devotional service, naturally the propensity to falsely claim lordship disappears. That is called as Vairagya. The yoga process necessitates controlling the senses. Yoga Indriya Samyamaha. And then Prabhupada says, unless one is not practicing bhakti, sense control is not possible. Prabhupada gives the example of Vishwamitra. And then he focuses prasaktam asatam pathi. The mind is always attracted by asat. That is the nature of the mind. Mind will always be attracted by the false things of the world. So the process is Ambarish Maharaj's process. Savai Mana Krishna Padarvindai. Okay, so now after describing the need for liberation, now from 6 to 11 verses, Prabhupada writes in the last line of this purport. Thus, the seriousness of Bhakti Yoga is stressed in this verse. Prabhupada never ever allows his readers to get confused by introducing any other yoga. कहीं पे भी कुछ भी बोलो, end में Prabhupada will speak the same thing. Why Prabhupada does that? Because Prabhupada knows the people of Kali Yuga. He is not Jagat Acharya, he is not Jagat Guru, just because he has written some books. He knows the pulse of the Kali Yuga people. And he has genuine affection and desire and compassion for Kali Yuga people. So therefore, he doesn't want them to get distracted again. Sab jagah bhakti yoga pe, even jnana, even yoga, kahin bhi ho, Prabhupada in the purport will focus only on bhakti yoga. So we should be very, very strong in presenting these concepts as it is. Because many times when we are teaching or we are preaching, we think Prabhupada ने एकदम straightforward बोल दिया है, मैं थोड़ा सा अच्छे से घुमा फिरा के बोलता हूँ. Of course, we can add some of the things which will relate to people, but ultimately we should emphasize Bhakti Yoga everywhere. Of course, depending on the audience we are preaching to, we are reaching out to. Okay, so now after this, he describes what is the practice of yoga to attain liberation. Yamadibhir yoga pathai
Yamadibhir yoga
yasan shraddhayanvitaha
Abhyasam
Shraddhayanvitaha
Vaibhavena satyena
Vaibhavena satyena
matkatha shravanena cha.
Matkatha Shravanena cha.
One has to become faithful by practicing the controlling process of the yoga system and must elevate himself to the platform of unalloyed devotional service by chanting and hearing about me.
So now he starts describing the limbs of Bhakti Mishra Gyan. Technically, he is describing Bhakti Mishra Gyan. And this Bhakti Mishra Gyan ultimately has, I'll just read the purport of Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. Yeah. Kapila explains the process of attaining liberation by Gyan. The practicing the path of yoga, concentrating the mind, realizing Jiva and Paramatma, one will attain non-duality. This is the path of Jnana. Jnani cannot attain liberation by offensive mentality of thinking that knowledge and bliss are different from the form of the Lord. So it is very important to understand that this jnana ultimately continues as Ashtanga, because jnani ultimately practices Ashtanga only. If the jnani thinks, no, I don't accept the form of the Lord, that is an offense. He will not get Brahman also. Prabhupada quotes this verse. Yanya Arvindaksha Vimuktamanina Toyastabhava Avishuddha Buddhaya. Those who are falsely under the impression that they are liberated and they are not practicing devotional service, they may reach the goal of Brahma Jyoti. That means that does not mean they actually get liberated in Brahma Jyoti. In this body, even if they are qualified for Brahma Jyoti, that means they are detached from the world, but because they are not having this devotion in their heart, that is impure consciousness. The impure consciousness is Arvindaksha Vimuktamanina. I don't want the Lord. They can't get liberated. They fall down. Then Prabhupada quotes a verse describing even a karmi does not get benefit if bhakti is not there. Anyone remembers any verse which tells if bhakti is not there, jnanis will not get liberation? चलो an example, कोई example तो याद होगा आपको? एक example बहुत बार बताया हमने. If jnana is there, bhakti is not there, he will not get the result. Anyone remembers? Empty husks, beating the empty husks. Sthula tushavagati nam. So this verse says, if bhakti is not there, karma will not give the result. Na ishkarmyam api achyut bhava varjitam. Achyut bhava means bhakti. If bhakti is not there, this naishkarmya means nishkam karma yoga, will not give the result. And then he quotes another verse from 11th Canto. If any members of 4 Varna and Ashrama fail to worship the Lord, they will fall down. Then he says, quotes a verse from Bhagavad Gita, Avajananti mama mudha manushim tanumashrutam. Even if somebody rejects the form of the Lord, they fall down. So basically what Kapaladev, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur is telling, that all the limbs of jnana or yoga, they have to be done along with bhakti. If bhakti is not there, you will not get liberation. Although your primary element is jnana, but secondary element has to be bhakti. Bhakti, although it is secondary, it is active ingredient. वो catalyst वही है, उससे ही काम होता है. So that is the understanding. You may want to merge in Brahman, but unless you accept that the form of the Lord is real, you will not get Brahman also. That is understanding. So, Srila Prabhupada writes, the yoga is practiced in 8 stages, Yam, Niyam, Asana, Pranayam. The practice of yoga by physical exercise is not ultimate goal. Ultimately, a Ashtanga yogi meditates on what? He does not meditate on Brahman. That's what the people, current yogis, they tell. Meditate on Brahman. Actual Ashtanga yogi meditates on the Vaikuntha Leela Avidhyanam, one of the limbs. Couple they will describe in the next chapter. Yogi meditate किस पे करता है? क्या करता है meditation? Vaikuntha Leela Avidhyanam. He meditates on the pastimes of the Lord in Vaikuntha. Prabhupada writes, Bhavena or Bhava is the very important factor in the practice of yoga. And then Prabhupada brings it to the process of devotional service. Buddha Bhav Samanvita. One should be absorbed in thought of love, understanding Krishna to be the Supreme Lord. Aham Sarvasya Prabhavo, Janmadhyasya Yataha, all these things. And then Prabhupada, he describes how the process of devotional service is the path of increasing our faith in Lord. And he quotes the various levels of bhakti, starting from Shraddha, because the word used is Shraddhayanvitaha, Abhyasan Shraddhayanvita. One should practice all this with faith. So he describes the various processes of faith. Of the 9 different items of Bhakti Yoga, the first and foremost is to chant. All this should be done with faith. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, all that. Shravanena cha. Without any duplicity, nikshiptena. Without any kapata. Kapat should not be there. Bhagavatam does not allow duplicity. Bhagavatam is a person. Bhagavatam is not any ordinary book. And yayathamam prapatyante. If somebody approaches Bhagavatam to get something different from what Bhagavatam is giving, he will not get. For that person, Bhagavatam will act like Mohini Murti. Anyone remembers the first beginning we discussed? Bhagavatam is compared with 4 things. Anyone remembers that? What all things Bhagavatam are compared with?
It's compared to a lamp,
Compared to lamb.
to sun,
Hmm.
and to Mohini Murti, and to a fruit.
True. Yes. So why it is compared to Mohini? Because if somebody is approaching Bhagavatam with a duplicity, with some motives, then they'll be cheated by Bhagavatam, like Mohini Murti cheated all the demons. So Bhagavatam will not give what the people are asking for. Bhagavatam can be approached only by a person who is simple, who is nirmatsara, who is without duplicity, and who is without envy. Nirmatsaranam satam. So that is understanding. So then Kapiladev, he continues.
Prabhuji, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
In this, you mentioned these are the limbs of Bhakti Mishra Jnana. So, primary is Jnana.
Yes.
So, here in the verse, I wanted to understand how do you differentiate it is not. Well, looking at the verse, Yamadibir Yogapate Abhyasan Shradhyanvita. After that, Mai Bhavena Satyena Mat Khatha Shravanena Cha. So, the point of Shravanam Kirtanam and the Bhava, and to whom? To myself. And if I look at the other way, so I may be wrong, I'm just looking at that. Why do? So, it is to bring a discipline regulation in life and practice Bhakti Yoga.
Yes, these verses can be translated for Bhakti Yoga completely. But if we see the technical progression of the chapters, Kapil Dev is explaining the process of Jnana. And that is how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains it.
Okay.
And Mai Bhavena Satyena is that the meaning is the Jnani should accept that my bhava is true, my form is true. He should hear my pastimes. That is what we discussed. Vaikuntha Leela Abhidhyanam. A Jnani meditates on the form of the Lord, hears the pastimes of the Lord. But I think there's a question. Prabhuji Raghunandan Ram Prabhu is asking, if a Jnani accepts the real form of the Lord, why he still wants to merge in Brahman? That's the unfortunate situation of a Jnani. Although he knows that form of the Lord is real, but still I am attracted more to Brahman. It is the mercy of Srila Prabhupada that he has saved us from this understanding. Because from the beginning of our devotional life, we have heard We have heard all the wrong things about Brahman. Oh, Brahman is useless. It is narakayate. It is not accepted by devotees at all. And we have developed this understanding. No, Brahman is not at all needed. But actually, Brahmananda is much, much higher than Jadananda. It is million times higher than Jadananda. Then why Srila Prabhupada and all the acharyas, they condemn Brahman? To save us from this desire for entering into Brahman. Because good is the enemy of the best. So it is not that Brahmananda is miserable, Brahmananda is at the lowest, third class. No. It is highest. Million times higher than anything we can conceive of in this world. But still, because the bliss of Bhakti is million times higher than Brahman. So the bliss of Brahman is much more than what we can even think of. But we should not settle with that bliss. That's why it is condemned. Otherwise, the desire में कम देखते तो आ जाके क्या है उधर इतना कुछ तो रहेगा ना अच्छा इतना बोल रहे हैं ब्रह्मानंद ब्रह्मानंद Jayadvaita Maharaj says, for all these Mayavadis, their names end with Anand and Anand ends with their name. So, for when we hear such things, we really develop strong conviction that yeah, Bhakti is the best. And it is the best. But we don't have this understanding that Brahman भी कम नहीं है Brahman जड़ानंद से बहुत बड़ा चीज है. So some people they get satisfied with that Brahman. जब मेरे ब्रह्मन में संतुष्ट हूँ मैं शांति है कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं है I don't want to get because इतना ही संसार के रिलेशंस में पिटाई हुई है I don't want relations with anyone in this world now. I don't want relation with God also. I just want shanti. I just want peace in life. That's why they want to merge in Brahman. That is their unfortunate situation. क्या करें अभी? Unless a jnani gets association of devotee, he will not develop a desire to practice bhakti. That is the unfortunate position of a jnani.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? Or should we go ahead? Okay, so now, after describing this, he continues. And 7, 8, 9, and 10, these 4 verses describes the 18 qualities which are cultivated by a jnana yogi. Sarvabhuta samatvena
Samatvena
nirvairena prasangatah
निर्वैरेण प्रसंगतः
brahmacharyena maunena
ब्रह्मचर्येण मौनेन
swadharmena baliyasa.
स्वधर्मेण बलीयसा.
In executing devotional service, one has to see every living entity equally, without enmity towards anyone. Yet, without intimate connections with anyone, one has to observe celibacy, be grave, and execute his external activities, offering the results to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Eternal activities.
Sarvabhuta samatvena, equality to all the jivas. Prabhupada writes, Vidya vinaya sampanne, brahmane gavyastini, shuni chaiva, shvapakicha, pandita samadarshana. This is a level of jnana. ज्ञानी है वो पंडित समदर्शिना means he sees everyone with equal vision. Nirvairena, no enmity. Aprasangataha, does not indulge in any material association. Following celibacy, brahmacharya, mauna, and swadharmena baliyasa, practicing, performing one's occupation as an offering to the Lord. Srila Prabhupada writes, he quotes this verse, Vidya vinaya sampanne. And then he says, a devotee has no enmity towards anyone. That does not mean he mixes with everyone. That is prohibited. So Prabhupada, whenever such things are spoken, he immediately clarifies what a devotee should do. मैं तो कब से सोच रहा था कि डिवोटी के साथ रहना सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है। ये देखो यहाँ पे लिखा है अप्रसंगतः, one should not associate with anyone. Prabhupada immediately clarifies. A devotee is concerned with his execution of devotional service. He should therefore mix with devotees only in order to advance his objective. He has no business mixing with others. Then he describes celibacy, and then the best policy of mauna is what? Prabhupada, he would tell that. There are yogis and jnanis, they take a vow of not speaking mauna, but what they are doing, they have a slate and a chalk and they keep writing. Their mind is working at full speed and they keep writing. They'll not speak a word, but they'll keep writing and telling. They are speaking more than other people. So what is actual mauna? Prabhupada writes, actual mauna means he should be enthusiastic to speak about Krishna. That is Vacho Vegam also. And then Swadharma. What is the Swadharma? What is occupation? Because Swadharma is different for different people. Dharmasya hi apavargasya nartho arthayopakalpate narthasya dharma ekantasya kamo labhai smrita 1 to 8. First Canto, second chapter, 8 verse. Dharma should be practiced for liberation. What is dharma of different people? We have discussed this many times. What is dharma of a karmi? What a karmi is supposed to do? Karma yogi ka kya hai dharma?
Activities.
He has to practice, he has to perform sacrifices. What is the liberation for a yogi, for a karmi? He wants heaven. Heaven. What is the dharma of a jnani?
Ultimate knowledge.
Knowledge. Tapasa brahmacharyena, shamena cha, damena cha. What is the apavarga for a jnani?
Brahman.
Brahman. What is the dharma of a yogi?
All the 8 limbs of
Samadhi. Samadhi.
Yam, niyam, asana, pranayam. These are the 8 limbs. These are the dharma of a yogi. What is the apavarga of a yogi?
Samadhi.
Paramatma realization.
Samadhi.
Is not धर्म हो गया तो समाधि में जाएगा किधर वो?
ब्रह्मन में.
Ultimately, yogi enters into Brahman. Because परमात्मा का कोई abode नहीं है. Paramatma only is in the heart. So ultimately, the destination of a yogi is either Brahman, or if by some good fortune he gets attached to the form of the Lord, he'll go to Bhagavan. That will happen only when he associates with devotee. अपने आप नहीं हो पाएगा. And the dharma of a yogi is, a dharma of a bhakta is what? What is the devotee?
9 limbs.
Dharma is
9 limbs of bhakti. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. What is the apavarga for a devotee?
Prema
Yes,
bhava.
Golokdham.
Prem bhakti. So Prabhupada writes here, Swadharma, the eternal occupation, is to act as a servitor of the Lord. Baliyasa, Swadharmena Baliyasa. The word used is Baliyasa. Baliyasa means by offering the result. Baliyasa means offering the results of the activities to the Supreme Lord. It does not, a devotee does not act for personal sense gratification. Whatever he earns, whatever he eats, whatever he does, he offers. Which verse Prabhupada is paraphrasing here?
Yat karoshi, yat juhoshi.
Yat karoshi, yat dashnasi, yat juhoshi, dadasi. So that's how. So in this first verse, 7th verse, the 6 qualities of a yogi are described, Jnani. And then next verse, next 8 qualities are described. Total 18 are described. So abhi pehle mein 6 ho gaye, फिर next में 7, 8 और बताएं. यत्रिच्छयोपलब्धेन संतुष्टो मितभुन्मुनिः
संतुष्टो मितभुक्तिः
विविक्तशरणः शान्तो
विविक्त शरणो शांतो
Maitra Karuna Atmavan.
मैत्र करुण आत्मवान.
For his income, a devotee should, he should not eat more than what is necessary. He should live in a secluded place and always be thoughtful, peaceful, friendly, compassionate, and self-realized.
Yadrikshaya Upalabdha at satisfied Santushta. Yadrikshaya Upalabdha Santushta. यदृच्छा अपने आप जो भी उस आए उससे संतुष्ट. मित भुक means he eats only what is necessary. Some people eat to live, some people live to eat. So this jnani, he lives only to keep the body and soul together, whatever is necessary. Mit bhuk. Muni means he is thoughtful. That is thoughtful. Muni. Then Vivikta Sharana, akele rehta hai wo. Does not mix with general people. Shanta, peaceful. Maitraha, friendly. Karunaha, compassionate. And Atmavan, he is self-realized. So Srila Prabhupada describes, and Prabhupada, he always translates the principles of Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga into process of devotional service. Ultimately, all these things which are described for a Jnani should be practiced by a devotee also. It is not that a devotee को तो जरूरत ही नहीं है, कितना भी खा सकते हैं और किधर भी जा सकते हैं. No. All these things should be practiced by a devotee also. So that is what Prabhupada writes here. He never tells that, अरे ये तो ज्ञानियों के लिए है, devotee को तो चलेगा. We should eat till neck. Prabhupada would tell in the beginning, you should eat so much that you walk like ducks. तो चलने को भी नहीं हो रहा, इतना खाए. But we don't realize Prabhupada told that only for beginning few years, when people were new to Krishna consciousness. After few years, Prabhupada told, now you should control. Prabhupada went with some group of devotees to a life member's house, and this Mataji was, माताजी कैसे खिलाती हैं, वो डाल रहे हैं, इसके बाद आते जा रहे हैं, और ये अमेरिकन लोग, उनको मालूम नहीं है ना बोलना रहता है, डालते जा रहे हैं, खाते जा रहे हैं. Then after coming back, one devotee starts shouting, Prabhupada, my stomach is aching. Prabhupada said, you eat 20 puris. Others started laughing. Prabhupada said, don't laugh, you ate 25. So this devotee said, how do you know, Prabhupada? Prabhupada said, I was counting. So Prabhupada told Baba, unka kaam hai khilana. You should control. You should know you're going not to eat, but to bring them close to Krishna. So शुरू में हम बोल देते हैं कि ना जितना खाओ, but ultimately, of course, after a certain age, body also can't take it. So students के लिए वो चल जाता है. But ultimately, these principles are for everyone. Prabhupada writes, Kapil Dev instructs that we should not endeavor hard for things which may come automatically without extraneous labor. मतलब अपने आप जो आ गया ज्यादा बिना मेहनत, कम मेहनत से मिल जाए, accept it. That is the principle of atyahar and prayas. How much is too much? That we should know. The principle of atyahar and prayas is very, very important for a devotee, practicing devotee. Otherwise, in the name of working hard to earn money so that we can ultimately, Prabhuji, ultimately I want to practice bhakti only. That's why I'm working hard. कि मेरा घर परिवार एक अच्छा घर चाहिए मेरे को, और एक बड़ी सी कार ले लूंगा. एवरीडे आई कैन कम टू टेम्पल फॉर मंगल आरती ना. और फिर वो कार का लोन चुकाने के लिए, अरे बाप रे प्रभु जी, आई हैव टू वर्क मोर नाउ, यू नो, आई एम नॉट गेटिंग टाइम. आफ्टर द लोन इज ओवर, पक्का आई विल कम. So we have to be really careful about this प्रयास. So that's what Prabhupada is writing here. जो अपने आप बिना कम मेहनत में आ जाए, accept it. यदृच्छया. It is not possible that simply by endeavors to accumulate more money, a person will be able to do so. Otherwise, everyone should be on the same level of wealth. नहीं, सबके कर्म के हिसाब से मिलता है. And then Prabhupada says, we should not endeavor much. We should engage our valuable time in prosecuting Krishna consciousness. Don't waste much of the time in getting the things of the world. Use the time, the minimum time required to take care of the family and the society and the body, and then spend the remaining time in Krishna consciousness. Because ultimately, of course, this minimum time and the minimum facility depends on the person's social status. For a king, his social status demands that he has to be in a kingly way. He has to live in that condition. He can't live like a beggar. He can't live like an ordinary citizen. A person who is staying in a very upper class conditions, he has to take care of these things. Otherwise, he will not be able to practice bhakti properly because he is used to that conditions. But that does not mean he will try to increase his assets, increase his conditions. So this yatricha and prayas, the principle, that is very dynamic. It is different for different people. It is not that the same principles applies to everyone. A person who is just able to manage his life simply with few thousands of monthly salary, and the king, he has to earn crores of rupees. But the king is using it in Krishna service, and the ordinary person is using in Krishna service whatever he can. Both are practicing bhakti properly. So it depends on the status also. But ultimately, both should be able to practice bhakti with a stable, peaceful mind. Prabhupada writes, advancement in Krishna consciousness does not depend on any material, prosperous, or distressed conditions. It is free from conditions imposed by material life. A very poor man can execute Krishna consciousness as effectively as a very rich man. And then Prabhupada writes about myth bhuk. Eat to keep the body and soul together, should not be gluttonous. Gluttonous matlab khate ja rahe hain. A devotee should only eat prasad. So some general thing Prabhupada is writing here, devotee should not be greedy. And then he says the devotee should be thoughtful. What he should be thoughtful of. Always think about Krishna and how to render better service. That should be his only anxiety. But as a materialist is always thoughtful about improving his material condition, a devotee should always be engaged in improving his condition in Krishna consciousness. That should be the only anxiety. No other anxiety. Of course, whenever these principles are spoken, we should understand, apart from whatever our day-to-day living requires, day-to-day living, maintaining family requires some anxiety. Sometimes the family needs more focus, more attention. Sometimes our seva needs more attention. Sometimes our japa needs more attention. So Krishna consciousness is always a dynamic balance. We have to balance all these things dynamically so that all these aspects, they go properly. We cannot just focus on one and neglect others. That defines a devotee. Balancing everything. Yukta ahara, yukta vihara, yukta swapna. But the greatest anxiety of a devotee is to practice how to advance in Krishna consciousness, how to serve Krishna better. So Prabhupada then describes about Vivikta Sharana. Again, Prabhupada writes, Vivikta Sharana means devotee ke saath rahiye. It is recommended that he live in a place where there is no large number of ordinary men. Next is devotee should be peaceful. This is very important. शांत रहना बहुत जरूरी है. If devotee is not peaceful, it will be difficult to practice Krishna consciousness. If too many things are troubling a devotee, it will be really difficult for a devotee to practice Krishna consciousness. So to have this peaceful mind requires a basic understanding that Krishna is ultimate controller. That keeps the mind peaceful. Because ultimately a devotee does not think what is happening and why is happening in my life. That peace of mind is needed. If it is not there, then it is very difficult to practice bhakti. And then Prabhupada writes about friendliness. A devotee should be friendly. Okay. It is a very interesting thing Prabhupada describes here. A devotee should be friendly to everyone, but his intimate relation should be with the devotees only. With others, he should be official. This is very important statement. With others, he should be official. If your friends, colleagues, relatives, they give some idea how to advance in your material life, you should become more ambitious. ये तुम्हारी इच्छाएं खत्म हो गई, तुम बड़ा घर लो, थोड़ी बड़ी गाड़ी लो, थोड़ा समाज में आपका मान होना चाहिए, सम्मान होना चाहिए, क्या कर रहे हो? What are you doing? Narad Muni gives a simple formula how to handle such people. Gyataya pitara putra bhratara suridopare yadvadanti yadichanti cha anumodeta nirmama. Prabhupada is writing that. Gyataya, आपके जान पहचान वाले, पित्र, आपके बड़े, पुत्र, your sons, Gyataya, Pitra, Putra, Bhratara, your friends, Surida, your well-wishers, Apare, और बाकी लोग, यद वदंती, यद इच्छन्ति. आपको जो भी बोले, जो भी इच्छा करें, you know how we should respond. We should never say, I am a devotee now. I have learned to become satisfied with minimum. You know how we should respond? और first class idea दिया है. वाह. Yes, sir. What you say is all right. बहुत अच्छा आइडिया दिया है. But we should never do it. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge it and don't get attached to it. Don't buy the idea. Acknowledge the idea or a first class idea. Wonderful. Thank you. And they will be happy. चलो यार सुना तो सही ना मेरा idea अच्छे से सुना. Maybe you'll act. And after 10-15 times telling, every time you say yes, yes, पक्का करेंगे, and you never do it, what will happen? They'll say, हमेशा हाँ बोलता है करता तो है, बोलने का फायदा नहीं. They'll stop speaking. They'll stop telling. That's what Prabhupada says here. He may say, yes, sir, what you say is all right, but he should not be intimate with them. A devotee should have compassion for persons who are innocent. Okay, and then he says about Atmavan. You should understand that the purpose of life is to develop connection with the Lord. Okay, next verse. Sanubandhe cha dehesmin
Anubandhe cha
Yasmin
akurvan asadnagraham
akurvan asagraham
jnanena drishta tattvena
jnanena drishtatattvena
purusha prakrite purushasya cha.
prakrite purushasya cha. One's seeing power should be increased through knowledge of spirit and matter, and one should not unnecessarily identify himself with the body and thus become attracted by bodily relationships. Hare Krishna.
So 17th and 18th, 15th and 16th, these two qualities are described. Seeing the power should be increased through the knowledge of spirit and matter. You should learn to see things from the eyes of scriptures. And one should not have so much identification with the body. One should not be obsessed with bodily relationships. Okay. That is ahamta and mamta, Prabhupada describes. Ahamta and mamta should go down for a jnani. Okay, next verse, translation. 10th verse, translation.
One should be
One
One should be situated in the transcendental position beyond the stages of material consciousness and should be aloof from all other conceptions of life. Thus, realizing freedom from false ego, one should see his own self just as he sees the sun in the sky.
Yes. So he should transcend the three states of intelligence, three conceptions. Nivritta Buddhi Avasthan. So the Buddhi Avasthan, the stages of material consciousness. What are the stages of material consciousness? There are three stages: Jagrata, Swapna, and Susupti. These are the three stages of material consciousness. When one is awake, when we are asleep, and when we are in deep sleep. Jagrata, Swapna, and Sushupti. Sushupti means deep sleep. One should be transcendental to three stages of consciousness. That means one should understand I am not any of these three states of consciousness. Either living, either sleeping, or deep sleep, a soul never gets affected by anything of this world. Our present consciousness should be freed from all perceptions of life other than consciousness of Krishna. That means one should see Krishna everywhere. Prabhupada quotes a verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita. Sthavara jangama dekhi na dekhi tara murti sarvatra hoye nij ishtadeva spurti. A devotee, whether he is seeing a movable object or an immovable object, he is seeing Krishna everywhere. That is how a devotee should see. So that is the state of a jnani. He is transcending the three states of material consciousness. And then ultimately he realizes the soul. Prabhupada describes. Chakshushe Varkam. As we can see, sun without a doubt. One who is fully absorbed, fully developed in Krishna consciousness, sees Krishna and his energy. He doesn't have any doubt. पता नहीं कृष्णा है कि नहीं, पता नहीं एंड में जाके कुछ मिलेगा कि नहीं. Just like one can see sun without a doubt, the devotee has no confusion. He is beyond all the confusions. Nashtamoho smriti labdva tat prasadat mayachvita sthitosmi gata sandeha karishya vachanam tava. Gata sandeha. All the doubts of a devotee are gone. So in this way, these 18 qualities of a yogi are described. And then in the 11th verse, the characteristics of the Atma are described. Now somebody can read the translation. 11th verse.
A liberated soul realizes the absolute personality of Godhead, who is transcendental, who is manifest as a reflection even in the false ego. The second, and he is the eyes of the illusionary energy. Hare Krishna.
Yes. So he is Muktalinga. He is the object of realization for the self-realized souls, Muktalinga. He is Sad Abhasam. He always remains. He is Sadabhasam Asati Pratipadyate. Asati means in this material world which is temporary, Paramatma always stays. And he is Sato Bandhum. He is a cause of the material nature. He is a support of the material cause. And Asat Chakshu. Asat Chakshu means he reveals the temporariness of this world. Asat dekhne ka chakshu hai. And Sarva Anusuyatam Sarva Anusuyata means he pervades everything. He enters everything. And he is Advayam. He is one without the second. So these are some of the qualities of Paramatma. After describing some of the qualities of Paramatma, now from 12 to 16 verses, Kapila Dev describes how to understand that there is a presence of Atma and Paramatma. This is a very, very interesting understanding which Kapila Dev is giving. So Atma hoti hai, Paramatma hoti hai. How to understand this logically? So Devahuti, she may say, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in the purport, how can Jiva be understood? So she may say that, well, you are talking about realizing Atma and Paramatma, but first of all, my question is how to understand that they exist. वो होता है पहले वो तो बताओ, उसके बाद realization की बात आती है. We are talking about realizing, but how to realize first that they exist? That is a question which Devahuti she asks. So now we have heard these examples many times by Srila Prabhupada. Kapil Dev is going to give the explanation by Anuman and Pratyaksha. By Anuman and by Pratyaksha, one can understand that there is Atma and there is Paramatma. So, Srila Prabhupada, he will also tell that how to understand what is the general example explanation we tell to some people about Atma hoti hai. क्या क्या बताते हैं हम लोग? General Bhagavad Gita course.
The chariot, car
Sorry.
drive.
I didn't hear. Can you explain? Repeat again, Mataji.
Chariot, the driver in the chariot.
Oh, okay, that is from scriptures. But how logically, what are the logic we tell to describe that Atma hoti hai? सीधा scriptures में scriptures. तो कैसे बताएंगे आप?
Everybody.
When a person leaves, we say he left. So who left?
Okay, that is one thing. Anything else? We
हरे
say
कृष्णा, हम बोलते हैं कि ये तुम्हारा हैंड किसका है, पेन
हाँ.
किसका है, लाइक दैट वी आर आस्किंग. तो मेरा मेरा करते करते वो मेरा कौन है ऐसे करके फिर आत्मा में
Yes.
जाते हैं.
So
हरे कृष्णा.
Prabhupada gives the same example in this. Conditioned soul thinks I am this body. Liberated soul thinks I am not this body. So these are some of the examples which Srila Prabhupada will give here in these series of verses to logically explain that body and the soul are different. And Srila Prabhupada, to understand, to give this understanding that Paramatma is also there, he gives a simple understanding. Different people work. I think he gives somewhere he writes this. He gives this simple understanding that two people are doing the same activity, but they get the different results. Who is controlling these results? Who is giving them different results? You may say according to karma, according to the actions they do. But who is controlling the actions? Who is governing this action-reaction system? Somebody must be there who is controlling this entire system of action and reaction. That is Paramatma. So these are some of the examples which Srila Prabhupada gives. Now, what example Kapila Dev gives to understand that there is Atma and Paramatma? If you have this Subodhini with you, you can open that, or I'll just share the slide. which describes the same thing which is given in Subodhini. Okay. So in this is the understanding of next few verses, which is given in this chart. We'll recite this 12th verse. Yatha jalastha abhasah
Kalasthabhasa
thalasthena vadrishyate
Kalastena Vishyate
swabhasena tatha suryo
Swabhasena
Swabhasena
Thasuryo
तथा सूर्यो
jalasthena divi sthitah.
Jalasena
दिवि
Divistita.
The presence of the Supreme Lord can be realized just as the sun is realized, first as a reflection on water, and again as a second reflection on the wall of of a room, although the sun itself is situated in the sky.
We will read the next verse and then we'll see the translation together. Emam trivridahankaro
Evam
एवं त्रिविधंकारो
bhutendriya manomayai
Bhutendriya Manomaye
swabhase lakshito nena
स्वभासे
Swabhasena
tadabhasena satyadrik
Tadabhasena Satyadrik
Translation.
The self-realized soul reflected first in the threefold ego and then in the body, senses, and the mind.
So, the first verse, 12th verse, gives the example, and then the inference is given in the 13th verse. So he says, just as yatha jalastha, just as the reflection in the water, so the sun is throwing its rays on the water, and the reflected rays from the water is falling on the wall. So we can see this scenario very commonly. सूर्य की किरणें पड़ रही हैं पानी पे, उससे एक और वॉल पे रिफ्लेक्शन हो रहा है. So that is the same example it's given. यथा जलस्थ आभासा, just a reflection in the water, स्थलस्थेन, it is reflected on the wall. So sun in the sky. The sun in the sky is reflected in the water. And then the reflection of the water is there on the wall. So when we see the reflection of water, sun in the wall, what we infer? Sun is there in the sky. Because sun pehle pani mein gaya, pani se wall mein aaya reflection. So the inference is what? Sun is there in the sky. Similarly, the jiva, evam, this jiva, which is trivrid ahankara, which is influenced by the threefold ahankara. It is lakshitaha. It is inferred by. How to understand that the soul is there? Pure jiva is there? The jiva reflects its consciousness in bhuta, indriya, and manomaya. We can see the consciousness of the soul getting reflected in the body, mind, and the senses. So from this, we can understand that Atma is there. Atma is there because the jiva, the mind, the body, the mind, and the senses, they are working. Only when the soul's consciousness is there in the body, then only the body will work. Then only the mind will work. We give the simple example, just like a car which has a driver, it will work. If the driver is not there, the car will not move. So the body is working, the senses are working, the mind is working. That means somebody is driving them. The soul is driving. So that is the understanding of Atma. And then he says, how to understand Paramatma is there. So he says, because the Lord is reflected in everything by his energy. That is the understanding of a pure devotee. We can understand that the Paramatma is there only when one is purified by the process of devotion. Then we can experience Paramatma. That is Pratyaksha. So कुछ चीजें हम अनुमान से लगा सकते हैं, लेकिन परमात्मा को देखना है तो परमात्मा के लिए शुद्ध मन चाहिए. So devotees who have purified their heart by the process of bhakti, sadabhasena, the word used is sadabhasena, they can see the Paramatma also. Paramatma is seen, Paramatma is experienced by a devotee who is purified in his heart. So because the soul is there, the body is functioning. When the soul leaves, everything stops. That is understanding of how to experience Atma. But interesting thing is, the more times it gets reflected, the more it becomes difficult to identify the original object, right? When the jiva is, he is reflected in various things, ahankar. Then ahankar reflects in the body, mind and senses. So the actual perception of the soul becomes very dull. इसलिए इतनी जल्दी नहीं दिखता है आत्मा. So that's why it is not so easy to perceive Paramatma and Atma, because Atma is itself very subtle. And the more it gets reflected, the more the coverings become more and more thick. It is difficult to identify that Atma is there. Now we'll see the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's example. When the reflection of sun is in water without disturbance, it appears on the clean wall. People sitting in the corner of a house sees the reflection. They think, where is the reflection coming from? Oh, acha, Surya ho gaya udhar. Chalo, theek hai. They can infer that sun is there. Intelligent people first see the manifestations of Paramatma in the body, senses, and the mind, since it possesses consciousness. Then they ask, where does this manifestation of Paramatma come from? Paramatma kahan se, uska manifestation kahan se? Acha, wo jiva hai. Okay, they infer that the jivatma, which is misidentifying itself because of the ahankar, it is a ray of manifestation of Paramatma, because Atma is a part of Paramatma. So Atma is manifesting under the influence of ahankar. So Paramatma must be there. By the presence of Jivatma, which is filled with bhakti, one realizes Paramatma. Otherwise, to realize Paramatma is not easy. Satyadrik. Satyadrik matlab pratyaksha kab hoga? When one can see Paramatma, when one actually gets purified. Otherwise, abhi to anuman hi hai. We can just logically accept that Atma is there, Paramatma is there. But when we will realize it, when we practice bhakti and we get purified, then we will see also. So that is the logical understanding of Atma and Paramatma. And then Prabhupada writes in the next purport. Yes. So then Prabhupada writes in the next purport, 13th verse purport. One conception is in the darkness of the three modes of material nature. Other conception is pure, that is Vishuddha Sattva. Prabhupada quotes this verse many times. Sattvam Vishuddham Vasudeva Shabditam Yadi Yate Yatra Pumana Pavrita. Puman, a person who is purified, he can see Paramatma in Vishuddha Sattva. Only a pure person can see Vishuddha Sattva Paramatma. But because we have false ego, we can't see. So a liberated person can see. He can understand his relationship with the Supreme Lord. In the conditioned state, one accepts everything on as an object of sense gratification. Oh, this will help me, this will satisfy me. But a purified soul accepts everything for service of the Lord. And then Prabhupada writes, what is Satyadrik? Satyadrik means one can see everything as a reflection of Supreme. An example is given. A conditioned soul sees a beautiful rose and he thinks the aroma is for one's own sense gratification. A pure devotee sees the same rose and he uses it in service of Krishna. That is Satyadrik. One understands everything is coming from Krishna and use everything in service of Krishna. That is called as Satyadrik. Prabhupada paraphrases this verse here. Anyone knows which verse Prabhupada is writing here? One who has engaged his energy, wealth, intelligence, words in the service of the Lord, he is a liberated soul. Very, very famous common verse. आप लोगों ने भी याद किया होगा. इह हाँ नहीं वो नहीं, भक्ति रसामृत सिंधु का श्लोक है. इह यस्य हरेर दास्य
कर्मणा मनसा गिरा.
हाँ आगे.
इव यस्य हरेर दास्य कर्मणा निखिलाशोपि अवस्थासु जीवन मुक्त सौचित.
Jivan Mukta Sauchis. That is what Prabhupada is writing here. So after describing these two things, then Srila Prabhupada, Kapila Dev, he continues to describe how one can see the Atma without the covering of the body by pratyaksha. मतलब ये तो अभी हमने अनुमान से देख लिया कि चलो भाई हाँ अभी आत्मा होती है परमात्मा होती है. प्रत्यक्ष कैसे देख सकते हैं? He says प्रत्यक्ष देखने का दो तरीका है. They are very interesting ways. He says, you can see Paramatma, you can see Atma in two conditions. Purified Atma. When you go to deep sleep, and if you want to wait after the universal dissolution. ये दो condition में you can see the purified, you can experience what happens in deep sleep. Actually, one is liberated in deep sleep because the body is not active, senses are not active, your mind is not active in deep sleep. That means it is a liberated stage. That's why after getting up from deep sleep, although we can't remember anything, but still, क्या बोलते हैं? अच्छा सोया. I don't remember anything. कुछ याद नहीं आ रहा है कब सोया और कब उठा. That is a bliss of Brahman. And Kapil Dev says, and if you want to wait till the end of universal dissolution. What will happen at the end of universal dissolution? The soul will enter the body of Mahavishnu. Without the gross body, without the subtle body. But that liberation is not so palatable. Although mukta hai wo, pura mukta jeev hai, still he is frustrated. Why he is frustrated? Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur gives an example. He is like a billionaire who is stripped of all the money. My desires are my wealth. Mera desire, meri ichhaएं. Subtle body, mind is all the desires. So the soul, although it is stripped of all the gross body and the subtle body, but still the soul is miserable in that situation because the lording over tendency is still there. Okay, we'll discuss this in the next class. We'll stop here.
Just one question.
On the
The
14.
So the soul has desire, the property of desire, without mind also.
Soul innately has all the functions of gross body and subtle body, right? The mind, intelligence, ego, that is a material thing which is given to a soul because the soul wants to enjoy in material way. But innately, the soul has a subtle spiritual body, and the subtle gross body. That is spiritual subtle, spiritual gross. The spiritual world also has earth, water, fire, air, ether. But they are all spiritual. The spiritual world has mind, intelligence, ego, but they are spiritual, they are not material. So the soul is having the innate capacity to do all the functions of all these eight elements. But still the soul is identifying, I want to enjoy in this world. लेकिन अभी मेरा सब resources ले लिया, अभी कैसे मजा करूंगा? Although he is liberated, but still he is miserable. That is the understanding of liberation at the end of dissolution. Miserable liberation. That is not Vaikuntha. That is still Kuntha. That is still misery. Okay, so let's stop here. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki
जय
Jai.
श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। प्रणाम। ठीक।